why Marvel is rebranding its television shows to eliminate the pressure to watch absolutely everything. I'm going to just read straight from this article, and I'd love to hear your reaction, Patrick. So this is by Adam B. Very. Adam writes, when Agatha All Along premieres on Disney Plus in September, the series will not open with a traditional Marvel Studios logo. Instead, the company is rebranding its streaming efforts as Marvel Television for live-action series and Marvel Animation for its animated shows, which just launched with the concluded first season of X-Men 97. The rebrands are meant to help Marvel disabuse audiences from the pervasive impression that its content is one unified narrative experience that must be consumed in its totality. There was a lot of pressure post Avengers Endgame on the public to feel obligated to watch absolutely everything, says Brad Winderbaum, Marvel's head of streaming television and animation. Part of the rebranding was a signal to the general audience that we're creating a lot of options, and you can follow your taste within this brand. Some will be more comedic, some will be more dramatic, some will be animated, some will be live action. Marvel is more than just one thing. It is actually many different genres that just happens to coexist in a single narrative, end quote. Now, Patrick Klepek, my first reaction is, didn't we already do this? You remember there was a thing called Marvel Spotlight that was literally supposed to be this exact same thing?
Yeah, I don't know if is this erasing? Is this Marvel Spotlight erasure? Or
here's the headline. Here's the headline from Variety, November of 2023. Marvel creates Spotlight banner for titles without larger MCU continuity, I should say. The Marvel's director calls it trial and error, figuring out what prior info viewers needed. End quote. So,
but is it like there's Marvel Television, and then below that, some shows are Marvel Spotlight, or is all Marvel Television Marvel Spotlight? You know what I'm saying?
Marvel will also maintain the separate Marvel Spotlight banner, meant to highlight one-off character-driven shows less connected to the MCU. The banner first launched with the gritty, adult-oriented series Echo in January, and will continue with the upcoming series Wonder Man, starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. There's going to be a Marvel Spotlight as well, in addition to Marvel Television. I'm just going to say, in my opinion, we'll see what happens with Wonder Man, but I think Marvel Spotlight in its first outing with Echo was basically a disaster. There's so much knowledge you had to have, and it wasn't even recent knowledge. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, it was shoehorned. It was like, oh, we didn't conceive of this show, write this show, shoot this show, edit this show, as though it was going to be wholly separate. I think when you and I watched it, it was not hard. You could see a version of that show if they were doing it from the jump. Like, hey, we're going to tell a story that's got, references like loosely connected, but like we can tell a story about this small town and like there was a way to do that story, but it's not the one they shot. And like, that's like Agatha All Along, like that's like deeply connected. Like, none of that means anything to you unless you watched WandaVision. And I loved WandaVision. It ended messy in the way that lots of like final acts of Marvel stuff can get messy. But like I adored 3/4 of WandaVision. It's easy to forget how big of a moment that was. Yeah. People were desperate for anything to watch at home in the early parts of COVID. And that was both like an excellent, unique show and arrived at a time where people were just ravenous for something to care and get obsessed about. And I think WandaVision more or less knocked it out of the park, absent a bunch of, CG fighting at the end that didn't feel like much of anything.
To date, probably the best Marvel TV show other than maybe Loki season 2, right? Like those would probably be my favorite seasons of Marvel television so far.
Yeah, agreed. But like at the time for Agatha All Along was like 2.5 years ago. It's been 4 years, like by almost 4 years by the time Agatha All Along arrives, like long enough that I can't remember how long it is in between. It's all really just to say this feels like a bunch of awkward necessary. I will say, like, I'm glad that these changes are happening. I think they are the right changes for the long-term creative. Let's put the commercial part out of it because that stuff is so weird right now at the box office and in streaming. But the like creative health of Marvel stories in movies and in television, this was the move to have made from the beginning. And it wasn't made due to arrogance coming out of Endgame, due to an ask of Marvel for Disney Plus to produce just way more than they were able to with their existing structure. All that stuff is sort of tied together. And so if Marvel's going to tell interesting stories going forward, this is probably the way to do it. The thing is, like, Agatha All Along is not connected to that. It's probably Daredevil. Like, all the stuff that Daredevil has gone through doesn't mean it's going to be good, but the way they paused, rebooted, brought back like continuity with the Netflix show, like it seems like they're starting to like making the right decisions for it to be a good television show, like just to be a show that services the people that want to watch that. But that's like a long-term project, and I don't know how that has anything to. It seems putting that on Agatha is going to result in people going, this doesn't feel like you applied any of these lessons to this television show. And how could they? It wasn't produced when they wanted to apply any of those lessons.
Yeah, I have a slightly different read on it, which is I think this. We'll see how Agatha All Along and this Wonder Man show do, like how well they are, how good they are artistically. But my assessment is we are witnessing a TV studio in disarray. That is my assessment of this, because they've already launched this thing that was like, hey, this is for small one-off stories. In my opinion, Echo, to make the maximum amount of sense, you needed to have watched not only Hawkeye, I think it was, but also the original Daredevil series on Netflix. It is a pretty critical relationship in that show that you need to have remembered.
It's even weirder than that, David, because you're right and you're wrong. You don't actually have to have watched the Daredevil Netflix shows, because at that point they were producing Echo as though the Netflix continuity didn't exist. They were removing it, and so they were bringing in. They brought back in like similar actors for like same actors from similar roles from the Netflix stuff, but at that time creatively we're just going to wash away 3 seasons plus the Defenders of Netflix, and it is only because of the creative reboot of this Daredevil season that they're doing that they went, maybe we shouldn't throw away 3 seasons of like beloved fan television just to make the MCU continuity 100% make sense with these characters. And so you're right that you would think that you have to have that baggage, but that's how complicated and weird this has gotten, because technically you didn't, because they were pretending those 3 seasons of television didn't happen. But why would you think that? Because that's crazy. You would think you had to watch those shows to watch it. It's a mess.
Okay, but I am correct that you ended up having, like, in the final Echo TV show product, it makes maximal amount of sense if you
yes.
If you have seen the Daredevil Netflix series, and Hawkeye, right? So
yes.
And maybe that wasn't always the plan, but it eventually became the plan. And so and the fact that some Echo episodes that are like 20 minutes long have 7 writers on them credited kind of reveals maybe what Patrick is talking about, that these things went through multiple rewrites. Okay. Then they have this Agatha All Along, which is a character based on another show. Now, what is the Agatha All Along going to be about, and where in the timeline does it take place, and whatever? Will you need to have seen WandaVision for Agatha All Along to make sense?
Augie Plaza's in it. Like,
who knows? Who knows? But I don't know. This to me reeks of, it was someone's idea at the office to make a brand called Marvel Spotlight, and then it launched. It didn't do super well from a brand perspective, although they're still going to use it with Wonder Man. And then somebody else's idea at the office was, I've got it, Marvel Television. What about Marvel Spotlight? Well, that was Johnson's idea. I'm not going to get credit for that at the review this year, at the quarterly review. So let's launch Marvel Television. I'm being like very simplistic. I don't think it quite, but like there is no reason you need to have Marvel Spotlight and Marvel Television, in my opinion, at this moment, right? Like, what is the function of having 2 separate brands like that?
At this point, you're asking people to do homework to figure out what's not homework.
That is so true.
Right?
That is so accurate.
Like, a lot of the creatives behind Wonder Man, it sounds awesome. Like, it's actually what the great hope was of Marvel doing television in the first place. Like, okay, what if you take characters that are just not going to be able to carry a film at the scale, budget, expectations that have gone on Marvel stuff for a long time? Wonder Man, like, just let him have a weird TV show. Let it be its own thing. Let it be interesting. And it hasn't turned out that way. Hopefully there's still time to but like, why does it have to be a Marvel? Just let it be a weird, I don't know. It's just I think it is an extension of a larger crisis within Marvel as they try to figure out who they are, what they are. While also the box office is not giving any clear signs about what kinds of movies and the shape they. So I think it's a reflection of Marvel being very creatively confused post Endgame, in the same way that lots of comic arcs are very confused post a big conclusive story arc, and then combine that with an economic outlook plus strike. I mean, it's just like so many things add up. I think that it's bleeding through to even things as basic as branding, and I think that suggests like much deeper troubles and confusion for the actual productions that are all still happening as people are in meetings going, well, how many brands, how many sub brands do we need?
I mean, I have heard from insiders, right, previously that things have really been like at this point there were multiple other shows we were supposed to have gotten from Marvel, right? By now, and
Ironheart was shot 3 years ago.
Ironheart was the Black Panther 2 character, right? Like,
yes,
remember that, like the Black Panther 2, and then Ironheart, and then that TV show was supposed to come out, and it never did.
Hey, Ryan Coogler, just shove this character in here so that we can set up the TV show and then not air that TV show for 3 years, thus probably making Black Panther 2, a movie that already had so much going against it because of outside circumstances, an even weirder narrative to weave together.
Yes.
Just
like Ironheart is expected to premiere in 2025. Whether it actually will, TBD. Another thing making this more difficult, Patrick Klepek, is there's very little Marvel product on the air right now. Now, we've already talked about it, like, and I think it's fine for them to take a step back and stop making terrible shows like Secret Invasion. Like, you know, take a break. Like, stop spending $200+ million on shows that are awful. Like, that's a good decision. But the problem with that is when you're introducing these brands, they're completely meaningless. It'd be one thing if there's like 3 shows every 2 months.
Right.
Coming out, and then like you could be like, oh, Marvel Spotlight, this is Marvel Television, Marvel, like, oh, the viewer starts to understand what's going on, like, but they don't have that opportunity because the cupboard is bare right now, and so I don't know, man. Marvel Television as a brand just feels really weird right now. Like, and maybe I think I'm gonna put this out there. What I see happening probably is they're going to retire the Marvel Spotlight brand. In 3 years from now, we're never going to see Marvel Spotlight again. It's all going to be Marvel Television from here on forward. Some schmuck who developed Marvel Spotlight as an idea either no longer works there or has less power at Disney.
He probably got a bonus though. Good for him.
Yeah.
He
paid an agency. He paid an agency. I'm going to guess somewhere in the range of $50,000 to make the Marvel Spotlight banner that showed up at the beginning of Echo. And that agency is the one that benefited the most from this whole situation. And that logo fed one creative director's kids for like 3 weeks, right? I'm gonna say. So that is my prediction for how this all plays out. But it's all very odd.
I think you're right. And some of the most tragic stuff out of all of this is like Miss Marvel's a terrific character, wonderfully cast. I liked a lot of parts about that show, and it sucks that like the show was like very awkward because it sort of like was structured strangely. It was doing like 2 or 3 seasons of television in like one really compressed run so that it could set up a character to go in the Marvels movie. I liked actually much more than like the commercial. Like I thought it was like a B movie by Marvel standards, and she was great in it.
Yeah.
But like, where does that character stand now? Like, it's essentially been wrecked by like Marvel's inability to have set up this synergy they were trying to do between television and film, and thus by no fault of the character or the actor, like where does that even, I hope they do right by the couple of good things that have come out in this time, which includes that character, because it would be a real shame to not have her part of wherever this all goes, regardless of what the commercial state of Marvel is, in the years to come.
Yeah. I agree. I actually think the Miss Marvel transition to the Marvels movie was probably like the ideal version of this. I mean, timing wise, not great. I think the movie came out significantly after the show had been out, right?
Yeah.
So that's not awesome. But otherwise, like creatively, Miss Marvel, pretty decent show. I didn't love it, but it's like I thought it was pretty good. And
there's like 3 really good episodes, and then It
I
has
mean,
to become
the premiere is awesome. Like just
It
visual,
is.
like the visual style of the premiere is amazing, and then they basically just stop doing that for the rest of
They
the
do.
show.
It's why it's like there's this amazing aesthetic touches. It's like I can't.
Yeah.
If this is gonna be like this is this
Oh
is
my!
why you do it.
Can they do this every episode? Nope,
No, they
didn't.
can't. No, they
They
can't. They
can't.
can't.
They can't.
They can't. It's
But
gone after
but
2 episodes.
but anyway, Iman Vellani was great in the show,
Yeah, she is.
and the show is very respectable TV show. I guess I should add Miss Marvel onto Loki season 2 and WandaVision season 1 in terms of like I think it's up there. It's like definitely one of the strongest
It's
ones.
carried by her. I think like the show, her family is like well cast. Like all that stuff works really well, and the story it tells across the show is sort of meh. But
and then all those characters
wonderful.
show up in the Marvels, right? Or not all, but most of those characters show up in the Marvels, and the Marvels like pretty fun, pretty inoffensive fun, I thought. And then unfortunately, one of the biggest MCU bombs in history, like box office wise, and I don't think it deserved it. Like if you compare the Marvels to other MCU, there's way worse MCU movies that did way better, right? Than the Marvels.
And so that's like other factors are playing into what's happening with these films, or at least the way that Marvel has doled them out, the rate of them. So like other things are happening, and it was not the fault of that film that its commercial lack of success was not reflective of the quality of the film at
Absolutely. What do you think is the worst Marvel film, Patrick Klepek?
I mean, Thor: The Dark World is such an easy one, but it's weird because
I was going to say Thor: The Dark World, by the way, which when it debuted in 2013 made $645 million worldwide.
Yeah,
which is a staggering amount of money for a pretty bad film.
But that's because it's got Thor and Loki. You know what I mean? Like the in some ways, I think better of the Dark World in retrospect because you could not have guessed how rich they would make the Loki character.
Fair enough.
Over the long tail. Like that's not a defense of that film necessarily, as much as a defense of like how great they made Loki over the long tail of the MCU. That's the one that comes to mind immediately.
Okay. Well, that movie made $645 million worldwide. The Marvels, $206 million worldwide.
Yeah.
So, and the Marvels is way better than Thor: The Dark World. Like, in terms of enjoyability, it's way better. Right? I would watch the Marvels 10 times before I watch Thor: The Dark World once, personally.
Yeah, I'm looking over the list now, and it's. I mean, Quantumania is bad, but
yeah.
I think Thor: The Dark World is probably that's the one that if my kids ever want to do a rewatch, like
Quantumania made $476 million worldwide, right?
Yeah.
So that's more than double what the Marvels made. Again, I think the Marvels is better than Quantumania. I would rather watch the Marvels than Quantumania, just because Iman Vellani I think brings so much to that role. Like she brings a lot of life to the MCU, in my opinion. So anyway, really, what we're trying to say here is the Marvels did not deserve the reputation it got as, the worst MCU movie box office wise since I think The Incredible Hulk. Going back to the main topic, we'll see how this all plays out with regards to Marvel Television, Marvel Spotlight. I think it's a very open question as to whether Disney and Marvel can make Marvel Television a meaningful brand for people where they see it and they understand, oh, this is disconnected from everything else. Like, they have not been able to achieve it yet. I mean, granted, they've only had one stab at it, but they failed abjectly with that. And I'm very skeptical as to whether they can achieve it in the future, but we'll see. I mean, arguably, even X-Men 97, as good as it was, theoretically, I guess you could watch that show without any knowledge of X-Men, right? But I do think you need some knowledge.
I feel like you need to know you don't need to know what happened. I didn't rewatch the animated series.
Right.
I know that's been but if you didn't know who
you need to at least know the dynamics.
Cyclops. Yeah, I do. I think it comes with some assumed knowledge of who the characters' like base characteristics are.
Yeah.
It doesn't do any of that catching up for you.
But maybe if they're able to achieve like that level of independent storytelling with Marvel Television, that will be enough of a success. Where like for Agatha, maybe you don't need to have seen WandaVision, like for Agatha to really land in a big way. I would hope
so. For how long it's going to be in between like those shows, and maybe that's part of why it's taken so long. Is not only Bob Iger wanting to
Right.
ratchet down the amount of that's coming out of Marvel, like lowering their output, but also just, can we, take the show and maybe more successfully than Echo, find a way to edit this in a way that it can be a compelling, but that's tough to do in post. You know what I mean? Like it's best to have made those decisions before you shoot it. And does that just mean Agatha is going to feel like a weird disconnected, like it's disconnected. You don't have to have watched what came before, but it will not have been given a fighting chance to stand on its own and tell a proper narrative, because they didn't write the show thinking that's the show so that's just a weird spot.
We don't have any evidence that they, other than the general disarray at Marvel, we don't have any evidence that they wrote the show without this knowledge, right?
I think it was shot a while ago, is the thing. Like same like Ironheart was shot multiple years ago, and so I was like, you can do a lot. I guess you can do a lot with it. It makes me nervous for, like, it puts a lot of pressure on these shows in a way that's not how they were conceived originally in terms of the kinds of stories they were going to tell. And I just feel like those creatives would likely tell different stories if you knew, don't worry about the rest of the universe, like, sort of stuff. So we'll see. I liked that character. I don't know that I needed, like, the meme energy is gone now. So now the show has to stand beyond, the Agatha all along having a clever song and that being obviously, like, played by a wonderful actor, but now it has to stand on its own. And can it do that? I don't know, but I guess we'll find out later this year.
Yeah, I think you're right about the production, actually, and that a lot of these shows have been mired in terrible post-production woes. Like, it feels like most of these shows, they've tried to find it in post, which is a terrible way to tell any kind of story.
That's Marvel's approach, though, has been, they've talked about getting away from that. It's part of why they have such intense VFX crunch. It's why they have such expensive productions. Like, they're going through that even now with the new Captain America film that they're doing. It's like, wow, third act didn't test well, so let's just shoot another one. Like, okay.
Oh, I think there's a bunch of reasons why they're doing reshoots on that one.
Like, I've a lot of responses on social media like, hope they're going to remove her from the movie. Go look it up. There's a specific, we don't need to get into it here. But
I'm also going to put this out there. You were talking about the meme energy of Agatha all along. It was Agatha all along.
Yeah.
And one of my favorite podcasts, Extra Hot Great. I was going to say my favorite TV podcast, but obviously this is my favorite TV podcast, the one we're recording right now.
I was preemptively getting offended.
Yeah. One of my favorite TV podcasts, Extra Hot Great, has this segment called "I Am Not a Crackpot," where people complain about things, but it's like, I'm not a crackpot, but this thing really bothers me. Patrick Klepek, I'm not a crackpot, but that song always sucked. Because it was not Agatha all along, as anyone who watched WandaVision can attest. It's like, it was Agatha did everything? No, dude, she wasn't doing everything, okay? Like, she wasn't doing everything. If you know what happens at the end of WandaVision, which I will not reveal, she was not doing everything. Okay. That's all I have to say about that. I'm accepting no further questions at this time. And we'll never speak of it again, at least until this fall when the show comes out. Hey everyone, David Chen here. Thank you so much for watching that video from Decoding TV. If you want to get an audio version of the show, all you got to do is go to podcast.decodingtv.com. And if you want to support what we do, get ad-free episodes of the podcast and also bonus episodes of the podcast, go to decodingtv.com and become a paid member. Of course, you can also like and subscribe for more. We appreciate it. Thanks. See you later.